When Jerome Washington found a briefcase containing $2 million in cash on a park bench, he faced the biggest test of his life. The homeless veteran had been living on the streets for 3 years, but what he did next would shock the millionaire who lost it. Before starting the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Park as Jerome Washington pushed his shopping cart along the familiar path he walked every day. At 48, Jerome had been homeless for 3 years, ever since a combination of job loss, medical bills, and PTSD from his Army service had cost him everything he'd worked to build. Jerome's daily routine was simple but methodical. He would collect recyclable bottles and cans from trash bins around the park, earning just enough money to buy food and occasionally a night in a cheap motel when the weather was too harsh for sleeping outdoors. It wasn't the life he had planned when he returned from 2 tours in Iraq, but it was survival. What made Jerome different from many other homeless individuals was his unwavering sense of dignity and honesty. Even in his darkest moments, he had never stolen, never cheated anyone, never taken anything that didn't belong to him. His father, a minister who had died 10 years earlier, had taught him that a man's character was the only thing that could never be taken away from him. As Jerome approached his usual spot near the fountain where people often left newspapers and magazines, he noticed something unusual under one of the park benches. A black leather briefcase sat partially hidden behind some fallen leaves, as if someone had forgotten it and walked away. Jerome looked around to see if anyone nearby might be searching for a lost item. The park was mostly empty, except for a few early morning joggers and dog walkers, none of whom seemed to be looking for anything. He waited for several minutes, hoping the owner might return, but no one approached the bench. Finally, Jerome's curiosity and sense of responsibility got the better of him. Someone had clearly lost something important, and he felt obligated to help return it to its rightful owner. He had always believed that doing the right thing was more important than minding your own business. Jerome carefully picked up the briefcase and examined it. It was expensive leather, the kind that probably cost more than Jerome had earned in the past 6 months. There was no nameplate or identification visible on the outside, but it was clearly the possession of someone wealthy. Maybe there's a business card or some ID inside, Jerome thought, deciding to open the case to find contact information for the owner. When Jerome opened the briefcase, his world stopped. The case was filled with neatly stacked bundles of cash, not just a few $100s or even a few thousand. This was more money than Jerome had seen in his entire life. Each bundle was wrapped with bank straps, and even without counting, Jerome could tell there had to be hundreds of thousands of dollars inside. Jerome's hands began to shake as he stared at the money. 3 years of sleeping on park benches, 3 years of digging through trash for bottles, 3 years of going hungry more nights than he cared to remember, and here was enough money to solve every problem he had ever faced. He quickly closed the briefcase and looked around nervously, making sure no one had seen him discover it. His mind raced with possibilities. With this money, he could get an apartment, buy decent clothes, get his teeth fixed, maybe even start a small business. He could disappear to another city where no one knew he had been homeless, where he could start over with dignity and respect. Jerome sat down heavily on the park bench, the briefcase at his feet, and tried to think clearly. This was the ultimate test of everything his father had taught him about honesty and integrity. No one had seen him find the money. No one would ever know if he simply walked away with it. The person who lost it was clearly wealthy enough that this might not even ruin their life. But even as Jerome tried to rationalize keeping the money, he knew in his heart what his father would have told him. Son, character is what you do when nobody's looking. A man who will steal when he's desperate will steal when he's comfortable. Once you compromise your integrity, you've lost the only thing that truly belongs to you. Jerome opened the briefcase again and began looking more carefully for identification. Beneath the money, he found several documents and business cards. The name Robert Sterling appeared on multiple items, along with the logo for Sterling Investment Management. There was also a cell phone number written on one of the business cards. Jerome had never heard of Robert Sterling, but it was clear from the documents that this man was extremely wealthy, the kind of person who could lose $2 million and still have enough money to live comfortably. But Jerome also knew that rich or poor, losing this much money would be devastating for anyone. Jerome pulled out his own cell phone, a prepaid device he had bought with bottle recycling money, and dialed the number on Robert Sterling's business card. Sterling Investment Management, a professional-sounding woman answered. "Ma'am, my name is Jerome Washington," Jerome said, suddenly self-conscious about his rough appearance and street accent. "I found a briefcase that belongs to Mr. Sterling. I think he might be looking for it." "A briefcase?" the assistant asked. "Can you hold, please?" After a few minutes of waiting, Jerome heard a man's voice come on the line, speaking rapidly and with obvious anxiety. "This is Robert Sterling. You found my briefcase. Where? When? Is everything still inside?" "Yes, sir," Jerome replied. "I found it in Riverside Park about an hour ago. Everything appears to be inside, but I didn't want to go through your personal papers too much." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You opened the briefcase?" "Yes, sir, I was looking for identification so I could return it to you." Another pause. "And you're calling to return it?" "Yes, sir. Where would you like me to meet you?" Robert Sterling was silent for so long that Jerome wondered if the call had been disconnected. Finally, Sterling spoke again, his voice filled with disbelief. "You found a briefcase with everything inside, and you're calling to return it?" "It's not mine, sir," Jerome said simply. "It belongs to you." What Robert Sterling couldn't bring himself to say over the phone was that the briefcase contained exactly $2 million in cash, money he had withdrawn from multiple banks for a private real estate transaction that required payment in untraceable funds. He had been carrying the money to a meeting when he stopped in the park to make a phone call, set the briefcase down on a bench, and then walked away without it when the call ended. Sterling had spent the entire previous night searching the park with flashlights and security personnel, offering a $100,000 reward for information about the missing briefcase. He had assumed that whoever found $2 million in cash would simply disappear with it, making it impossible to ever recover. "Mr. Washington," Sterling said carefully, "could you meet me at the park in 1 hour? I'll come personally to pick up the briefcase." "Yes, sir. I'll be waiting by the fountain." "Mr. Washington, one more question. You said your name was Jerome Washington?" "Yes, sir." Are you homeless?" Jerome hesitated, embarrassed by the question, but unwilling to lie. "Yes, sir, I am." The silence that followed lasted nearly 30 seconds. When Robert Sterling finally spoke again, his voice had completely changed. "Mr. Washington, I'll be there in 1 hour. And thank you." Jerome spent the next hour sitting on the park bench with the briefcase, watching people walk by and wondering what would happen when the wealthy Mr. Sterling arrived. Several times, Jerome found himself opening the case to stare at the money, trying to comprehend the amount of cash he was about to give away. $2 million could change everything for him. He could buy a house, get medical treatment for his service-related injuries, maybe even help other veterans who were struggling like he was. He could disappear and start a new life where no one would ever know he had been homeless. But every time Jerome considered keeping the money, he heard his father's voice reminding him that a man's word and his integrity were the only things in life that truly belonged to him. Money could be lost, stolen, or taken away, but character was forever. When Robert Sterling arrived at the park, Jerome was surprised by what he saw. He had expected a pompous, arrogant rich man in an expensive suit, probably with security guards and an attitude of superiority. Instead, Sterling appeared to be a man in his early 50s, well-dressed but not flashy, who approached Jerome with obvious nervousness and curiosity. "Mr. Washington?" Sterling asked hesitantly. "Yes, sir, that would be me," Jerome replied, standing up and gesturing to the briefcase on the bench. "I believe this belongs to you." Sterling stared at Jerome for a long moment, taking in his worn clothes, his weathered face, the shopping cart full of recyclable bottles. This was clearly a man who had been living rough for some time, a man for whom $2 million would represent salvation from poverty and desperation. "You really found this and called me to return it?" Sterling asked, still seeming unable to believe the situation. "Like I told you on the phone, sir, it's not mine. It belongs to you." Sterling opened the briefcase and quickly confirmed that all the money was still inside. Every bundle was exactly as he had left it. Nothing had been taken, nothing had been disturbed, except for the minimal searching Jerome had done to find identification. "Mr. Washington," Sterling said, closing the briefcase, "do you have any idea how much money is in here?" "No, sir, I didn't count it. I just saw it was a lot and knew I needed to find the owner." "There's $2 million in this briefcase," Sterling said quietly. $2 million in cash. Jerome felt his knees go weak. He had known it was a lot of money, but hearing the actual amount made the magnitude of his decision hit him like a physical blow. He had just given away enough money to solve every problem he had faced in the past 3 years and every problem he was likely to face in the future. That's a lot of money, sir," Jerome managed to say. "Mr. Washington, can I ask you something personal?" "Yes, sir." "How long have you been homeless?" 3 years, sir." "And you found $2 million in cash, and your first thought was to find the owner and return it?" Jerome looked directly into Sterling's eyes. "Sir, I may not have a home right now, but I still have my integrity. Money comes and goes, but once you lose your character, you've lost everything that matters." Robert Sterling felt something shift inside his chest. He had built a fortune worth over $200 million by assuming that everyone had a price, that every person would compromise their principles for the right amount of money. He had surrounded himself with people who shared his cynical view of human nature, people who believed that virtue was just a luxury for those who had never faced real hardship. But standing in front of him was a man who had faced the hardest hardship imaginable and had still chosen integrity over personal gain. Jerome Washington had just proven that character wasn't about circumstances, it was about choices. "Mr. Washington," Sterling said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. When you found this briefcase, did you think about keeping the money?" Jerome hesitated, then decided that complete honesty was the only appropriate response. "Yes, sir, I did think about it. I thought about it a lot. This money could have changed my whole life. But my father taught me that a man's word and his character are the only things that can never be taken away from him. I couldn't live with myself if I had stolen from you, even if you never found out it was me." Sterling nodded slowly. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "Yes, sir, he was. He was a minister who believed that how you treat people when you have nothing says more about you than how you treat people when you have everything." "Mr. Washington, I have a proposition for you." "Sir?" "I want to offer you a job." Jerome looked at Sterling with confusion. "Sir, I appreciate the thought, but I don't have any business experience. I'm not qualified to work at an investment company." "I'm not offering you a job at my investment company," Sterling said. "I'm offering you something different. I want you to run a foundation I'm going to establish, a foundation dedicated to helping homeless veterans get back on their feet." Jerome stared at Sterling in shock. "Sir, I don't understand." "Mr. Washington, today you taught me something I had forgotten. You proved that character and integrity aren't dependent on wealth or status. You showed me that some of the most honest people in our society are those who have the least material wealth." Sterling paused, looking around the park where Jerome had been living for 3 years. "I've been successful in business because I assume everyone is motivated by greed and self-interest. But you just proved that assumption wrong. You had the opportunity to steal $2 million and disappear forever, and instead, you chose to do the right thing with no expectation of reward." "I don't need a reward for being honest, sir." "That's exactly why you're the right person to run this foundation," Sterling replied. "I want to start with a $10 million endowment focused on providing housing, job training, and medical care for homeless veterans. You would be the director with a full salary, benefits, and complete authority to design programs based on what you know veterans actually need." Jerome felt dizzy. "Sir, I think you might be making a mistake. I don't have experience running anything that big." "You have something more important than experience," Sterling said. "You have integrity, and you understand the population we're trying to serve. Everything else can be learned." 6 months later, Jerome Washington sat behind the desk of his office on the third floor of the Sterling Foundation building, reviewing applications from veterans seeking assistance with housing and job placement. The foundation had already helped 47 homeless veterans find stable housing and 23 find full-time employment. Jerome's transformation had been remarkable but gradual. Sterling had insisted on providing him with a fully furnished apartment, professional clothes, and comprehensive health care to address his service-related injuries. But the most important change had been in Jerome's sense of purpose and self-worth. "You know what's funny?" Jerome said to his assistant Maria, a former homeless veteran who had become one of the foundation's first success stories. "6 months ago, I was sleeping in this park, digging through trash for bottles. Now I'm running a multi-million-dollar organization." "What changed?" Maria asked. "I learned that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, creates opportunities you never expected," Jerome replied. "Mr. Sterling didn't hire me because I was qualified. He hired me because I proved I could be trusted with something important." The Sterling Foundation had become a model for other cities with its innovative approach to veteran homelessness and its emphasis on hiring people who had experienced homelessness themselves to design and implement programs. Jerome had been invited to speak at conferences across the country, sharing his story and his insights into effective solutions for veterans in crisis. "The most important thing I've learned," Jerome told audiences, "is that homelessness isn't a character flaw. It's a circumstance, and circumstances can be changed when society decides to invest in people rather than just managing problems." Robert Sterling had also been transformed by his encounter with Jerome. The cynical businessman who had once believed that everyone had a price had become one of the city's most generous philanthropists, focusing particularly on programs that addressed the root causes of poverty rather than just its symptoms. "Jerome saved me in ways he'll never understand," Sterling said during a television interview about the foundation. "I had spent so many years assuming the worst about people that I had lost sight of the best. He reminded me that character isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with what you're given." The reporter asked Sterling about the $2 million Jerome had returned. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if he had kept the money?" Sterling smiled. "I think about it all the time. If he had kept the money, I would have lost $2 million but gained nothing. Because he returned it, I learned something worth far more than money, that integrity still exists in this world, often in the most unexpected places." 2 years after finding the briefcase, Jerome Washington was featured on the cover of a national magazine as one of the country's most innovative leaders in addressing veteran homelessness. The foundation he directed had expanded to 5 cities and had helped over 500 veterans transition from homelessness to stable housing and employment. But perhaps the most meaningful change was in the relationship between Jerome and Robert Sterling, who had evolved from a simple business transaction into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to helping others. "You know what I realized?" Jerome said during the foundation's 2nd anniversary celebration. "That briefcase wasn't really lost. It was exactly where it needed to be, when it needed to be there, for both of us to learn something important about trust and second chances." Sterling raised his glass in a toast. To second chances and the people who prove that character matters more than circumstances. The story of Jerome Washington and the returned briefcase became more than just a tale of honesty rewarded. It became a reminder that integrity is not determined by wealth or status, that the most trustworthy people are often those who have the least to gain from being trustworthy, and that sometimes the greatest rewards come not from what we keep for ourselves, but from what we choose to give back to others. Jerome proved that being homeless didn't make him less honest, and Robert Sterling learned that being wealthy didn't make him more worthy. Their unlikely partnership demonstrated that the most meaningful relationships are built on respect for character rather than appreciation for circumstances. If this story touched your heart, remember that there are Jerome Washingtons all around us, people whose current situations don't reflect their true character, whose integrity remains intact despite facing circumstances that would tempt others to compromise their values. Sometimes the most important discovery we can make is recognizing that honesty and trustworthiness exist in unexpected places, waiting for someone to give them a chance to shine. The briefcase that started as a lost fortune became the foundation for a found friendship, proving that the most valuable things in life, trust, respect, and genuine human connection, can never be bought, only earned through the choices we make when everything is at stake. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.